Welcome to Education Influencers, the podcast spotlighting change makers shaping the future of learning. I am your host, Dr. Carla Sparks. Each episode, we sit down with trailblazing educators, and today we have a special guest, Alfredo Matthew III. Alfredo Matthew is working to build a more inclusive and regenerative economy, one rooted in ownership, equity, and shared prosperity. Over 25 years, Alfredo has worked at the intersection of education, workforce development, and entrepreneurship. He began his career as a public school teacher in the South Bronx, Oakland, and Pasadena, and was named Teacher of the Year in 2002-2003 by the Office of the Superintendent of Bronx High Schools. After leaving the classroom, he led the Bay Area office for the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, connecting thousands of students to Silicon Valley companies and career pathways. He later co-founded ESO Ventures, a pioneering entrepreneurial support organization that authored and passed California legislation to fund inclusive entrepreneurship statewide. From a $5,000 contract and a concept over 4 years, Alfredo led the strategic partnerships that incubated over 500 Black and Brown-owned businesses, deployed over $6 million in capital, and helped secure $22 million in public and philanthropic investment for community-rooted entrepreneurship across California. Today, Alfredo is the founder and CEO of SPCC One, the world's first shared prosperity community corporation, a new kind of economic infrastructure designed to help communities consolidate small businesses, deliver shared services, and access multi-million-dollar contracts and growth capital. His long-term vision is to create a federated network of local economic engines in underinvested communities across the globe. Welcome, Alfredo. It's wonderful to have you here as my guest today. Thank you for joining Education Influencers, and I'm really looking forward to what you have to share with our audience today. So let's begin with having you share a little bit about your professional journey that led you to become involved in connecting education with the workforce.
Great. Well, Carla, thank you for having me here. I enjoyed our first conversation, and I'm excited to be meeting your audience today. So I guess, I was doing some writing the other day, and I realized I was in education for 40 years. And I say that because the first 20 years of my life, I was a student. The next 20 years of my life, I was an educator. And so education is something, a system that shaped me that, obviously I got these books behind me because I love learning, I love reading. And I guess at some point during my educational journey in around 2013, 14, I said, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep preparing young people for college when so many of my young people need to make money. And I've been on a journey for the last 10 to 12 years of learning about entrepreneurship, wealth building, careers, the world of work, because I really think that we need to be bridging education, the workforce, and entrepreneurship. That's the focus of my work, because I just think we treat them as separately, but they're really all interconnected. And so that's something that I didn't know that I was going to get into when I was younger. I love history. I love the social sciences, but now I really love learning and applying learning in the real world.
I love that. I think it's fascinating to take the opportunity and have the ability to make those connections. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about that as we go along. So I understand that you're supportive and interested in project-based learning, and I have a background in that as well. So I can imagine why that matters, but I would like to hear from your perspective why you think that's an important thing to be involved with.
Well, I did not realize that I came from a school of education but I very much, I put the pieces together. I come from a school of education, and I think it goes back to John Dewey, and then you can take it to Paulo Freire, and then you can take it to Deborah Meyer, that Sizer. I know we might talk about some of that lineage. But when I came into teaching in New York City in the 1997, I was a ESL teacher at a comprehensive junior high school. And then I had an opportunity to start a small high school at South Bronx High School. It was a New Century High School, a Gates-funded small school, but it was all project-based. It was all, it was a thematic. We had a relationship with Eastside Settlement House. So like, how do you connect what you're doing in the classroom to the community? I was a history and humanities teacher. So all of my projects were like, all right, let's study immigration and let's go to Ellis Island. Like, how do you use the city as a classroom? How do you connect the students' lives? And then, I taught everything because I ended up teaching at an IB school, and I taught AP history. I taught at a charter school. I did a bunch of different things. I prefer depth over breadth. And I like the cyclical nature of projects. I like thinking interdisciplinary, and I like how projects are in my life, in work. It's all project based. I'm a consultant. I've got clients. I meet with the clients, understand what is the problem, and it's an inquiry cycle. That's what I'm doing with my clients. And I have deliverables. And I get these deliverables to my clients. They give me feedback, and we go back into another loop. So I just think that projects, when I meet with a client, I go out for work. They're not like, okay, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff. Now you tell it back to me. And if you tell me everything that I just told you and you get 100% correct, I'm going to pay you. That has never happened to me in my life. The clients are saying, I have a problem or an issue that I don't know what to do about. Can you help me? And what do? I go and I talk with a bunch of different people. I come up with something, I give it back to them. And that's what I did with young people. I taught young people how to ask good questions, how to work, cooperatively, how to be critical thinkers, right? These 21st century skills. Remember the 21st century skills? That was like, for like 10 years at the beginning of the century. Like, those things are not going away. Projects are not going away. And so I love it. And I just love connecting your learning to the real world.
I couldn't
Yeah.
agree with you more. I mean, I have a philosophy that I've shared with many people along the way, and it is that traditional tests show me as an educator what you don't know. I can't tell from a test what you do know. I can only tell what you don't know. But if I give you an opportunity to create a project, any kind of project, you can show me what you do know. And I think that's the authentic way to go. And I think it's what makes sense is to give people in general, whether they are students who are 5 or students who are 55, the opportunity to show what they do know. And that's always through projects, project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, problem-solving learning, all of those things that come together. So I think we are very synchronous on our way of thinking about that. So that leads me to ask you to share your views on the school choice movement. You mentioned slightly there for a minute about that and its connection back to Ted Sizer, the Coalition of Schools, as well as Ivan Illich and Deschooling Society.
Yes. So as I shared, I was a teacher in New York City. I was a teacher at Blair IB in Pasadena. I was a teacher at charter school in Oakland. I kind of just followed, I felt like my life from the mid 90s until 2014 was just like the history of American education reform. Like, I tried on all these different clothes just to see like what works, what fits. And I ended up being a little disillusioned because education just didn't feel like it was changing. Public education is not a very easy system to change. And I think if you go back to Ted Sizer, right, that whole coalition of essential schools, it was about authentic learning. It was about human scale learning, small learning communities, which were very popular when I started a high school, Mount Haven Prep in the South Bronx. It was all about small learning communities. And that was very popular for about a decade. But at the same time as that movement was going on, we also had No Child Left Behind, and we had kind of rigorous accountability coming in. So there was this project-based learning and here's this rigorous accountability. Rigorous accountability, one. Project-based learning in CTE. I know you taught CTE. I've worked with a lot of CTE teachers. That exists in the CTE world. The traditional core academic subjects went more on the testing and the accountability. And I think right now, we're actually going to go back to the project-based learning because testing and accountability does not work with AI. When you have AI instruction, that just kind of blows up the model. But as I've been watching the school choice movement happen and I see it evolving, this is not a left or a right issue. The left has been trying to de-school society for a long time, right? Very upset that there's this compulsory model of education and this Paulo Freire, this banking model of education. We need to get rid of that. Ted Sizer, Deborah Meyer created this small school movement. This is more really about like democratic education, right? There's a whole line of that. But what I've seen is that there's also like a lot of families are not happy with the public school system. Milton Friedman back in the 60s was like, hey, we need vouchers. We need to be funding, having more market-based approaches to education. So there's been a market-based approach, and how do we, have more parental control over, not have this monopoly of the state, and you have this democratizing education, and these two movements are happening. And now we finally are deschooling society. Like it is happening, not the way Ivan Illich was talking about in the 60s and the 70s. It's happening in a very different way. It's happening through vouchers. It's happening through the micro school movement. It's happening through parents just want choice. People want choice. And I think right now we have so much choice. We have a marketplace. And I do think that the traditional public system is going to change, and it's going to have to change very quickly. And it's because we haven't prepared for that change that I think that this is a moment where we all really need to be paying attention to public education, because these large districts and this large bureaucratic system, once the students leave, what's going to happen to that large bureaucratic system? So I am very much paying attention to the school choice movement. I'm excited that there's innovation, and I'm concerned that we're going to lose the public nature of public schools. I'm all for the market. I'm for innovation, but how we do it matters. And I just I'm curious what your audience, what people are seeing and thinking, because I think Florida is a leader in this. I think Texas is a leader in this. I think there's a number of states that are leading this. And I just want to make sure that we don't lose the public nature. I do think that it's a good thing that schools are a place that all people come together from different socioeconomic backgrounds, from different faith backgrounds. It's great that we have a common meeting place. And my concern is that as we fragment, we won't have that common meeting place. So those are some of my thoughts on school choice.
Yes, and it's, debated hotly in lots of circumstances and among circles of people. And you're right. It can be a wonderful thing for a child and for a family who's looking for something different. You mentioned micro schools. We have micro schools that I'm familiar with here in Florida, and they're meeting a need. And yet then, there is that concern that you bring up about, well, what about the traditional public schools? What about those and the masses that they serve? And some of the really good work that's going on in those schools. It is really a balancing act. And I think we all have a long way to go to figure out how to keep that balance just right. So given your extensive background, what are your thoughts on market-based approaches to education?
I would say the market-based approach to education is here. We cannot put our heads in the sand and pretend that educators and schools are not part of the economy. Like very much schools and educators are part of the economy. I think when I came into teaching in the late 1990s, I was teaching with people, they had already been teaching for 20, 30 years. They were career educators. In my 14 years in the classroom, I saw a revolving door. After I hit my 5th year, which is when I really learned how to teach, I saw a lot of new teachers coming in and then those teachers going right out. And I was like, wow, they didn't even really learn to teach. It was just like a stepping stone. And it was frustrating for me as an educator because I said, how do I grow with peers? I think that schools are going to be much more porous. I don't think that educators, well, one, in our society, people are not doing one career. People have 7 or 8 careers. People make transitions. People make pivots. And I don't think that education is going to be immune to the fast pace of change in our society. And so I think educators are going to have to be more entrepreneurial. I think school leaders are going to have to be more thoughtful of the economics of their districts. They got to understand their pension responsibilities. They got to understand their facilities. And I think when I was a young teacher, I was like, it's not about the budgets. It's about the kids, It very much is about the budgets, like I was just talking to a teacher this weekend at Frisco ISD, which is here in North Texas. And she's been a teacher for many years, wonderful teacher. And she's just sharing that her, superintendent's like, hey, we all need to get comfortable that this is a market-based approach to education now because the demographics of the district are going down and changing. And as the demographics are shifting, schools are going to close, teachers have to be more flexible and adaptable. And so this is going to be a period where it's not like, hey, I'm going to come into the profession and I can predict 20 years from now, what teaching is going to be like. And I know that I'm going to have this cushy pension at the end. I don't know what's going to happen to pensions. I don't know what's going to happen to healthcare. I don't know if these larger districts are going to be here. It might be a portfolio model, right? There's a lot of different things that can happen, but I know that teachers are starting to be aware. I actually need to pay attention to enrollment. I need to pay attention to the finances of the district. A concern with that is that we have a pendulum swing. And, I've worked in charters and I've worked in traditional public on the same campus. And I see that fight for enrollment between schools. I mean, I'm sure it happens in Florida and that's what I don't want to see. I don't want to see the crabs in the barrel just competing over enrollment and trying to have flashy websites and whatever in order to, get kids. Because what I also saw is that I might have a family in my school. The cousin is going to the school right next door. We're all serving the same community. And if the schools are fighting over enrollment, ultimately we're not being measured on how well is the community doing, right? Is there economic mobility? Is there public safety in this community? Is there well-being in the community? We're based on how are my students' test scores compared to how is that student's test scores. And I think that's the wrong way to measure success. And so I am looking at this and I am concerned, and I see it in my own kid's school who, a charter just moved right next door, and we just lost 80 students from my child's elementary school. And I'm like, oh my God, if this happens another year in a row, are they going to close my local elementary school? And then I'm going to have to go further. So this is an issue that impacts all families, all Americans in every community. And I don't think that we realize the distinct, because once these districts go down, they're not going to come back, right? You're not going to build them back. And so what does education look like 10 years from now? What does it look like 20 years from now? As an entrepreneur, I always have to be looking around the corner, like where is business going? Where are the trends going? My kids are going to be in school for in public school they're, 8 and 12, they're going to be in school for another 8 years. And then they have to go on to higher education. So, right. I'm invested. I'm thinking about all this, both as an educator, an entrepreneur, and as a parent.
It's a lot to think about. And it's at times overwhelming to think about. as
Yeah.
a parent and a grandparent, I can relate to those feelings of uncertainty and decisions to make about things that we don't know what will occur, right? So
Yes.
it's we're planning for what is invisible right now and trying to be smart about that, because if we don't, then we're going to regret that later. So tell us a little bit about what current projects you're working on to influence education.
Well, I would say that I stopped teaching young people in 2019. I was a classroom educator for many years, did a lot of youth development. I became a nonprofit director for Nifty, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. And so for 5 years, I drove around the Bay Area, connecting Silicon Valley companies to high schools all around the Bay Area. So PayPal, Salesforce, EY, and SAP. I did design challenges, did all this work. I love real world learning and I love connecting young people to opportunity. But I said, young people are not the ones that are going to be really creating businesses. It's actually adults who are creating businesses. And so I learned that I love andragogy. Pedagogy is teaching kids. Andragogy is teaching adults. And so I've been a serial entrepreneur for the past 6 years. And I actually love working with adults because I support entrepreneurs and adults need learning and support too. And small business owners need learning and support. And I love supporting small business owners. So I've done a lot of work, launched a company, ESO Ventures, that does business incubation. And we have a debt investment fund. We help businesses get off the ground. We provide working capital, community, and, curriculum and support. But more recently, I started a new company, SPCC One, Shared Prosperity. It's a Shared Prosperity Community Corporation, which is about how do small businesses of one come together, work as a group, and compete for contracts and capital. And this connects back to education with the micro school movement and all the things that are happening. I do believe that we're going to get smaller. These big, large districts are not serving people, right? That's why people want the school choice, because they don't feel seen, valued, heard. When you have a much smaller community, you actually can be seen, heard, valued. But what I've learned from small businesses, like a micro school, a business of one is not sustainable. If you only have one teacher and that teacher gets sick, there's no learning, just just as an example. And one person cannot do the marketing, the administration, all of the back end services. So I know that a lot of these micro schools are going to get federated into groups. And that's the same thing that has to happen with small businesses. Small businesses need to work as a group. They need common back end services because a business of one just can't do everything you have to do as a business. There's 33 million business owners in the United States. 28 million of those business owners are sole proprietors, business of one, right? There's about 1,000 large companies that are the companies that we all know that dominate the economy, but most small businesses are very small. And so the work I'm doing now is I'm looking at industry verticals like healthcare, like education, like certain things in terms of last mile services for residential homes, like electricians. And how do you help these small businesses work as a group, get federated, and compete? So that's what I'm very interested in, is helping businesses level up beyond the business of one. And I'm just also, I do consulting. I support a lot of businesses who have kind of hit their ceiling and they need to level up. And I am looking at education because I see that education is a vertical I really care about. It's an industry I really care about and I know. And I'm trying to find what is the best way for me to come back. I'm not going to come back as a classroom teacher as much as I love it. But how can I come back and how can I help design, a system that really balances economic vitality and public benefit? I do not want to lose the public benefit in education because it's foundational to all of us, but the economics have to make sense. And so I'm on a journey to kind of figure out what that is.
That is fascinating. And one of the things I really appreciate about what you said, if I can put the word collaboration on it, you're talking about bringing together these small business owners so that they can have an impact that you can't have alone. You may have some impact, but this greater impact requires collaboration. And so you're putting in action what Ted Sizer was talking about a long time ago, what Tony Wagner is talking about right now, what John Cotter is talking about right now, using collaboration and teaching students how to collaborate. And as an educator myself, I can't think of a better way to help students learn to collaborate authentically than to have them doing project-based learning. So there we go back to that, right?
Yes.
It always goes back to that. In my professional opinion, project-based learning is the panacea to education. I really think we could all get together on that and make that the primary function of our schools and classrooms, that it would solve a lot of problems. In my own experience, it solved classroom management, it solved attendance, it solved promptness, it solved accountability, it solved engagement. Students would say, I came to school today for this class. I was not going to come. And then I remembered what I had to do in it, because what they did mattered to the larger community, because their project was a publication. And that matters. So whatever their project is, if they have an audience that's counting on it, then it really matters. And that all then rolls up into those entrepreneurs, those business owners that you're talking about. So they have that foundation. We could go on about this for hours.
We could, but I would say education is going to go back to public demonstrations of learning. We've gotten very addicted to private automated demonstrations of learning. We're not going to be able to do private automated demonstration, right? The Scantron world that we all taught in, AI kind of makes it really irrelevant, because I'm talking with kids, my mentees who just finished college, UC Berkeley, they just used AI. He literally told me, and I'm wrong, he or she, I'm not going to name names. They said that they and all of their friends are giving the assignments to AI so that they can focus on the stuff that they really care about. That is going to happen more and more. I mean, it's obviously happening.
Yeah.
We cannot compete against AI. AI is a tool. It's going to be used. Texas just banned phones in schools. Great. We're going to ban it. And then guess what? When you go to work, your boss, your employer does not want you not having a phone. They want you using AI to do your job faster. So we can't ban the tools that employers are expecting workers to be able to use and leverage. This is like part of that disconnect. Like, AI is here, the market is here, let's embrace it. There's benefits to it, but we have to change our instruction. And guess what? AI can't tell you how to, increase the, reduce homelessness in your community. AI can't tell you, and actually do it and implement it, figure out, how to reduce drunk driving in your community. I mean, I don't even know, like, what is a problem? What's an unmet need? What's an innovative solution? And then go try and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. In my experience, I've seen students solve high school kids solve complex problems in society through project-based learning and present their findings in front of a jury of adults who are in the field that they are studying to become part of. And I think, the day that brought me to tears was when I saw a doctor of pharmacy offer students the opportunity to work with her to publish what they had just presented at findings based on their project that they had conducted a study on small children with diabetes that were not easily controlled and how to make that better. And
young people
solution.
Young people can do hard things.
Yeah, they can.
And we need to be preparing. All of us, we have to do hard things. It's not the easy stuff. The easy stuff is the easy stuff.
Right.
Like we got machines to do the easy stuff. The hard stuff is the relational stuff. It's the dialogue. It's the communication. It's asking the questions that don't have a clear answer
Yeah.
and inching towards truth.
Yes.
You're never going to get to truth, but you can inch towards it. And so that's what I hope education is focused on, which goes back to the project-based learning, problem posing education. That's never going to go away.
So we have a lot of really great ideas. You've done some things that have produced a lot of fruit. I have done some things that have produced a lot of fruit. So what recommendations would you make to educators working in K-12 schools? And also, what recommendations would you offer to educators working in post-secondary environments?
So that's a big question.
Yes.
I would say I worked with a number of teachers who were mid-career transfers, right? They had other careers. They were lawyers, police, they did different things, and then they came into teaching. I was one of those teachers who I started, young, 22, 23, and I taught until I was nearly 40. Schools need to be more porous. Schools are not an island. Education cannot be an island. I would encourage educators to, if you're a young educator, go out and get some work experience, go get some life experience, and then come back into teaching. Like go back. And if you are and out there and you're a professional out there and you see what's happening, go and teach. You have a lot to share with young people. I mean, as a young person, as a 20-year-old, I had the energy to be with these kids and I loved it and I worked my behind off and I had a great experience and I know I did a good job. What I could do now is so different. I would not have the same energy, but I have so much more life experience and wisdom. I have so much to share. And so I think young people need a mix of adults. They need 20-year-olds and they need 50-year-olds. They need 70-year-olds. Right? And we all need that. We need a nice mix. And so I think teachers, be open to change. I know, hey, I love history. That's my background. I love writing. I love history. I love economics, right? Like you've got to like stay open to learning throughout your life. It's not just that students need to be lifelong learners. Teachers need to be lifelong learners. And don't think that your profession is not going to change. Not when everyone else has no job security. Not when everyone else is, we're going to have a lot of disruption with AI. And so I think you said earlier in the conversation, it was something about like, we can't predict. We literally cannot predict where the jobs are going to be 10 years from now. Once we have automated driving and there is no more Uber and Lyft drivers, right? That's employing a lot of people. There's no more truck driving because it's going to be automated. Have we thought about that? Like, I don't know what percentage of people drive for a living, but I don't know, 10%. Like, that's a pretty big shift. And it's coming in our lifetimes. It's not coming like 50. No, it's coming in the next 10 years. Like, we could do it now. We're just not ready for it. And cognitive work is starting to be automated, right? You don't need a person to file your taxes. If it's basic taxes, a machine can do that, right? So it's like that level of automation that's coming. I don't think that we're prepared for it, and I don't think educators are prepared for it. So I encourage all of us, embrace change, be open to adaptation. And we need each other. It's all about collaboration, communication, because that is what's never going away. Emotional intelligence, public demonstrations of learning, there are things that are universal that are never going away, and a lot of other things are. And so it's that like, there's a tension that we're living through. And I think that's creating a lot of anxiety. And my last thing is just that teachers have an incredibly important job. My daughter, I let her, she went to school this morning. I'm entrusting my daughter to these teachers. My daughter is precious. I love her. And this is a tough world. And I know that her first period teacher loves her. Thank you. Thank you, Colleen, because I know my daughter is going to a place where she's going to be cared for. The number one thing is just being consistent, positive, and caring for all of your kids.
Yeah, that's what we all want, right? We all want to feel good about where our children are going when they leave the house in the morning and how they're going to return to us and what mindset they will be in after their day, right? That my
Yeah.
question is always, what was the most important part of your day today? What was the best moment? Not that old, how was your day? That doesn't mean anything. Let's narrow that down. Like, what class held the most meaning for you today? Okay, answer. Now, why? Right? And it's always going to be because they did something fascinating and engaging.
It is. But I'll tell you, when I talk to my kids, it's normally when they talk about what happened, it was their friends. It's the interaction with their peers.
Yes.
And so that's the other reason for projects, because projects get you interacting with peers and not always just your friends. It's
Right.
important that young people, just like us in the world of work, we have to work with not just the people that we like and know. You have to work with people who think differently than you, who have different skills and backgrounds. That's part of life. And so I want my children to be exposed to lots of different people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with all of these things in mind, what tips would you offer to education leaders so that they might have a greater impact on connecting students to successful careers?
My number one tip is teach your teachers and your young people to think like entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is the number one career path in the 21st century. We're all entrepreneurs. And, every industry sector has a component of entrepreneurialism. And I think school leaders very much they are the CEOs. They're driving the business, they're understanding the finances and the trends, and they're leading teams. And I just think entrepreneurial leaders, systems leaders need to embrace the market, not giving up their public mission. You have to balance economic vitality and public benefit, but you have to think entrepreneurially. You need to demonstrate that. And you need to not just you do it at the home office. You need to help your site leaders be entrepreneurial. You need to help your teachers. You need to help your students, because schools cannot be islands. Schools need to be porous, right? We need apprenticeships. We need work-based learning. We need real world projects, right? I would love to see more districts, just like we have this great technology. How do you leverage this technology to connect people in different places? Like, you can do it asynchronously. You can do it, through video. Too much of our teaching is too static. It's too the same old. Let's leverage the technology. Let's leverage, like what's in the community to make learning more dynamic, engaging, and real world. That's it.
And that is it. That is what it's all about. That really is it. So, Alfredo, it's been so wonderful to have you here today. Thank you so much for giving of your time as an entrepreneur. I know that you have a lot of irons in the fire on any given day and a lot of things going on, and you chose to give us some of your time today to share your thoughts. And I really appreciate that.
Well, Carla, thank you for giving me the opportunity to meet you and meet your community. And I appreciate what you're doing, because you're not just trying to do the same old. You're really pushing the envelope, and you're engaging in a thoughtful process of reimagining education. So thank you for everything you do.